The morning sun poured through the tall glass windows of the Grant mansion, but the house still felt cold. It was a kind of cold that had nothing to do with the weather. The rooms were large and beautiful, filled with expensive furniture and quiet servants, but there was no warmth in the air, no laughter, no sound of life. Alexander Grant sat at the head of the long dining table, staring at the tablet in his hands. His breakfast sat untouched. He scrolled through numbers and reports, his mind lost in meetings and profits. The world outside his company barely existed to him anymore. Across the table sat 3 little girls, his daughters. Lila, the oldest, sat silently, her small hands moving a spoon through her cereal, though she never took a bite. Sophie hummed softly to herself, tapping the table in a rhythm only she understood. Maya, the youngest, was curled up in her chair, holding a small stuffed bear close to her chest. None of them spoke. They rarely did. A housekeeper moved quietly around the room, collecting plates and cups, careful not to make too much noise. Alexander didn't look up. He hadn't looked up much since his wife, Clara, died 3 years ago. Clara had been the heart of this house. She had brought color to every corner, laughter to every room, and patience to every storm. When she passed away after a sudden illness, the light seemed to go with her. Alexander had thrown himself into work, telling himself it was the only way to cope. He built companies, closed deals, bought more things, but nothing filled the hollow place inside him. The girls reminded him too much of her, and every time they cried or needed him, he felt helpless, unqualified, even resentful. Over time, he grew distant. The girls grew quiet. The house grew still. In the last year alone, 7 nannies had come and gone. Some couldn't handle the emotional strain. Others didn't understand the girls' needs. They all left with kind excuses but relieved faces. Each of the Grant girls had been diagnosed with autism. Lila preferred silence and routine. She panicked when things changed. Sophie could talk but often got lost in her own thoughts, repeating certain words when she was overwhelmed. Maya, the youngest, didn't speak at all yet. She communicated with gestures and soft sounds, holding on to her bear whenever the world felt too big. To Alexander, their conditions were a list of problems to solve, not lives to understand. He hired therapists, tutors, specialists, but never stayed in the sessions himself. He believed money could fix anything, as long as he found the right people. That morning, as he prepared to leave for work, his assistant called. "Mr. Grant, the agency has sent another recommendation," she said through the phone. "A woman named Evelyn Johnson, experienced in special needs care. She's available immediately." "Fine," Alexander said, slipping on his watch. "Just hire her. I don't have time to interview anyone." "Yes, sir. She'll start tomorrow." He hung up without another thought. The next morning, the front door opened to a soft voice greeting the butler. The new maid stepped inside, holding a small worn handbag and a calm smile. Her name was Evelyn. She was in her early 50s, dressed neatly in a simple uniform. Her eyes carried the kind of peace that comes from years of struggle and understanding. The staff led her through the vast marble halls to meet Alexander. When he finally looked up from his laptop, he gave her a quick glance, nodding slightly. "You'll be helping with household tasks," he said in his usual sharp tone. "The children have a therapist who comes twice a week. Keep the routines. Don't bother me unless it's important." "Yes, sir," Evelyn said politely. Her voice was steady but warm. Alexander didn't notice the gentle strength in it. He had stopped noticing such things long ago. The first day passed quietly. Evelyn observed more than she spoke. She noticed the girls' patterns, the way Lila lined her crayons in perfect order before drawing, the way Sophie whispered to herself when the lights were too bright, and how Maya refused to be touched unless it was her stuffed bear brushing against her hand. At lunch, she prepared something simple, chicken soup and soft bread. When she placed the bowls on the table, Lila stared at it suspiciously. Sophie pushed her bowl away, muttering. Maya hid her face. The previous maids would have tried to coax them, maybe scold them. Evelyn did neither. She simply sat at the table, spooning soup for herself, humming softly under her breath. A slow, soothing melody. At first the girls ignored her, but after a few minutes, Lila's spoon began to move again. Sophie's humming shifted to match Evelyn's tune. Maya peeked out from behind her bear. Evelyn smiled but said nothing. She understood that forcing love or trust never worked. You waited for it to come. You showed up every day until it did. That evening, Alexander came home late as usual. He walked past the living room where Evelyn was quietly cleaning up toys. The lights were dim, and soft music played from an old speaker. He paused when he saw Lila sitting on the carpet, coloring beside her. Normally, the girls were asleep or in their rooms by now. But there Lila was, calm and focused, occasionally glancing up at Evelyn for quiet approval. Alexander stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure what to say. She didn't want to go to bed yet, Evelyn said gently, sensing his presence. Sometimes she just needs a little more time to unwind. She should be asleep by 9, Alexander said stiffly. Yes, sir, Evelyn replied. We'll be done soon. He nodded and walked away, but something about that scene stayed in his mind. For the first time in months, he had seen one of his daughters doing something peaceful, something normal. Over the next week, Evelyn brought a kind of quiet rhythm to the house. She didn't just clean or cook, she noticed. She paid attention to things most people missed. The way Sophie liked to press her palms against cold glass when she was upset. The way Maya only ate when someone sang softly beside her. She began to hum more often while working. It wasn't loud or distracting, just gentle songs, old church hymns, and lullabies from her childhood. The girls responded to it like flowers turning toward sunlight. One afternoon, Alexander was on a business call in his office when he heard faint singing from the hall. It was Evelyn's voice, soft but steady, carrying through the large house. He frowned at first, ready to tell her to lower it, but then he heard something else, a small, clear voice humming along. He opened his office door quietly. Down the hall, he saw Lila sitting near the staircase, tapping her fingers to the rhythm, her lips moving in tune with Evelyn's song. For a man used to silence, the sound was startling and beautiful. That evening at dinner, Alexander found himself watching his daughters more closely. They seemed a little lighter, more at ease. Evelyn served the food and asked softly, "Would you like more rice, Sophie?" Sophie nodded. That was unusual. She rarely responded to direct questions from adults. Alexander looked at Evelyn, who smiled politely, then carried on serving the meal as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Later, after the girls went to bed, Alexander sat in his study with a glass of water, staring out the window. He didn't understand how this woman had managed to do in a few days what others couldn't in months. He told himself it was coincidence. The girls were just adjusting. But somewhere deep down he knew it wasn't that simple. The next morning he came downstairs earlier than usual. The sound of soft laughter greeted him. He followed it to the kitchen, where he saw Maya sitting on the counter, swinging her legs while Evelyn peeled apples. Maya wasn't speaking, but her tiny giggles filled the air. "She likes the sound of the peeler," Evelyn said, noticing him. "Says it sounds like a bird. At least that's how she gestures." Alexander nodded awkwardly. "I didn't realize she liked that." "She likes patterns," Evelyn said. "She likes to know what comes next. The sound helps her predict." He looked at Maya, who was now staring at him with wide, curious eyes. He smiled faintly, unsure of what to do. She quickly turned away, hugging her bear. "She's shy," Evelyn said softly, "but she sees you." Her words hung in the air longer than they should have. That day, Alexander found it hard to concentrate at work. He kept thinking about his daughters, about Evelyn's calm presence. He realized he didn't even know what kind of song she sang. He didn't know what the girls liked to eat or play with anymore. He used to know back when Clara was alive. She had made him promise to always be there for them, no matter how busy he became. But promises made in love sometimes get lost in grief. That night when he came home, Evelyn was helping Sophie organize her crayons. Each color was in perfect order. Lila was reading a picture book nearby, and Maya was lying on the floor with her bare eyes half closed. "They're calmer lately," he said quietly. Evelyn smiled. "Children feel peace when we show them peace. They sense what we carry inside." He didn't reply, but her words echoed in him. Over the following days, Evelyn became a steady presence. The staff began to smile more. Even the halls felt different, less like a museum, more like a home. One rainy evening, Alexander came home earlier than usual. He stopped near the living room again, drawn by the sound of music. Evelyn was sitting on the carpet with all 3 girls, showing them how to fold paper boats. "Now watch," she said gently. "If you fold the corners like this, it floats better." Sophie clapped. Lila whispered something, just 1 or 2 words. but Evelyn nodded as if she had said a whole story. Maya placed her boat on the small puddle forming by the window. They all laughed when it drifted slowly. Alexander watched from the doorway unnoticed. Something inside him softened. He remembered Clara folding paper cranes for the girls once, their giggles filling the house just like this. For a moment, the ache in his chest turned into warmth. When Evelyn noticed him standing there, she didn't stop what she was doing. She simply smiled and said, "We're testing boats, sir. Would you like to join?" He almost said no, but something in her calm eyes made him pause. He took off his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and sat down awkwardly beside them. The girls looked at him curiously. "I used to make these when I was a boy," he said. His voice came out softer than he expected. "Then you're already an expert," Evelyn said, handing him a piece of paper. For the first time in years, Alexander folded something that wasn't a business deal. He made a small boat, placed it next to the others, and smiled when Maya touched it lightly with her fingers. It was a small moment, but in that quiet room it felt like a beginning. Later that night, after the girls had gone to sleep, Alexander found himself standing in the hallway outside their rooms. He listened to their soft breathing, the gentle sound of the rain against the windows. He hadn't done that since Clara's funeral. When he turned, Evelyn was coming out of the laundry room folding towels. "Mr. Grant," she said softly. "The girls are doing well." "Yes," he said. "They are." There was a pause. He wanted to thank her, but the words felt too heavy, too unfamiliar. Instead, he said, "You seem to understand them." Evelyn smiled faintly. "I understand what it's like to be misunderstood," she said quietly. "Sometimes all people need is patience." He nodded, unsure what to say. As she walked away, he watched her go, feeling something stir in him, something he hadn't felt in years. Respect, gratitude, and maybe the faint beginning of hope. That night, as he sat in his study, the sound of Evelyn's humming drifted through the house again. He closed his laptop, listening. It was the same melody he had heard that first day, gentle and steady, like a heartbeat. For the first time in a long time, the mansion didn't feel so cold anymore. Days passed in the Grant mansion, and something subtle but powerful began to change. It wasn't sudden or dramatic, but it was real. The house that once felt like a museum now carried small traces of life, the faint smell of cookies baking, the sound of soft laughter, the gentle hum of music that seemed to come from every corner. Evelyn had found her rhythm in the household. She woke before sunrise, making breakfast quietly while humming to herself. She prepared the girls' lunches, arranged their toys, and made sure each one started the day calmly. She didn't rush them, and she didn't scold them when they hesitated or froze. She simply waited. Patience was her way of speaking. One morning, Alexander came down earlier than usual. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he couldn't sleep, or maybe he wanted to see what had changed. He found Evelyn in the kitchen, cutting fruit while the girls sat at the table. Sophie was coloring. Lila was building a small tower of wooden blocks, and Maya was watching the toast pop up from the toaster with wide eyes. "Good morning, sir," Evelyn said softly when she noticed him. "Morning," Alexander replied, a little surprised at how peaceful everything felt. He poured himself coffee, glancing around. There was no shouting, no crying, no chaos. Just quiet, gentle order. "Would you like some breakfast?" Evelyn asked. He hesitated. Usually he ate in his office. "Sure," he said finally. Evelyn smiled. "We have oatmeal and fresh fruit. The girls helped me cut the apples." Lila looked up for a second, just long enough to meet her father's eyes. It was a tiny moment, but it made his chest tighten. He sat down slowly, feeling strangely like a guest in his own home. Evelyn placed a bowl in front of him and another near Sophie, who was still coloring. Sophie looked at him for a second, then held up her drawing. "Bird," she said quietly. Alexander blinked. "That's a nice bird," he said, unsure what else to say. Sophie smiled, a small, fleeting smile, and went back to coloring. Evelyn saw the exchange but didn't interrupt. She let the moment breathe. After breakfast, Alexander stood by the door as the girls played near the window. He had meetings to attend, calls to make, but for some reason he didn't rush out. He just stood there, watching Evelyn tie Maya's shoelaces and listen to Lila explain her tower of blocks without using many words. Evelyn understood her perfectly. When he finally left, he carried that picture in his mind. The soft morning light, the sound of humming, his daughters calm and happy. It stayed with him through every meeting, every email. Later that week, he came home early again. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. When he entered the house, he heard faint music. Not from a speaker, but live. Following the sound, he found Evelyn sitting on the floor with the girls. She was playing a small keyboard that had probably been gathering dust for years. Her fingers moved slowly, carefully while she sang a simple tune about sunshine and rain. The girls were listening. Lila tapped her foot. Sophie waved her hands like a little conductor, and Maya clapped offbeat but joyfully. Evelyn noticed him but didn't stop. She nodded for him to come closer. He hesitated, standing by the doorway, feeling awkward as always. But when Sophie laughed at a funny note Evelyn played, he couldn't help but smile. After the song ended, he cleared his throat. "That's nice," he said, sounding far too formal. "Music helps them feel safe," Evelyn said. "It gives their emotions shape." Alexander nodded. "I didn't know that." Evelyn looked at him for a moment, her expression kind. "They want to connect, sir. They just do it differently. Sometimes we have to learn their language instead of expecting them to learn ours." He didn't reply right away. Her words made him uncomfortable, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. He realized he had never tried to learn their language. He had only expected them to adapt to his world. "Do they always like music?" he asked finally. "Almost always," Evelyn said. "It's one of the few things that makes them all respond together. You should play with them sometime." He gave a half smile. "I don't think I'd be much help." "You'd be surprised," she said gently. That night he lay awake thinking about what she said. He remembered how, when Clara was alive, music filled the house. Her laughter, her songs, the way she'd dance with the girls in the living room. He used to join in sometimes. But that was before the world went gray. The next day he did something unexpected. He came home before sunset. When Evelyn looked up, surprised, he shrugged and said, "Traffic wasn't bad." But the truth was he had left work early on purpose. The girls were in the garden, playing with bubbles. The golden light made their hair shine, and their laughter, small but real, floated in the air. Evelyn stood nearby, holding a bowl of bubble mix and smiling softly. "Would you like to join?" she asked. Alexander looked at his suit, then at the bubbles, then at his daughters. "I suppose I could," he said quietly. Evelyn handed him a wand. "Just dip it in and blow gently." He did. A large bubble floated up, catching the sunlight. Maya gasped, pointing at it. Sophie clapped. Lila laughed. The sound of their laughter hit him like a wave, warm and healing. He hadn't heard it in so long. For a moment, he felt like a real father again. Later, after the girls went inside for their bath, Alexander stayed in the garden, lost in thought. Evelyn came to collect the toys. "You have a good way with them," she said softly. He looked at her, surprised. "Me?" She nodded. "You were patient." They felt that. He didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. But inside, something shifted. He realized that maybe the distance between him and his daughters wasn't impossible to cross after all. Days turned into weeks, and the house began to change more. The girls followed routines with less fear. They ate better. They smiled more. Evelyn was always there, calm, steady, and kind. She never raised her voice, never forced affection. She simply loved them in quiet ways. One night, Alexander found her in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. "You've done more for this house in a few weeks than anyone in years," he said quietly. Evelyn smiled, wiping her hands. "It's not me, sir. It's them. They just needed someone to listen." He hesitated, then asked, "How do you know how to do this? You seem to understand them better than anyone." Evelyn paused. For a moment her eyes grew distant. "I had a son once," she said softly. "He was a lot like them. Smart, gentle, saw the world differently." Alexander waited. "He passed away when he was 12, she said, her voice low but steady. "I learned from him what love without words looks like. He taught me patience. He taught me to see." Silence filled the kitchen. Alexander swallowed hard. He had not expected that. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "Thank you," she replied with a small smile. "But he still teaches me even now. When I see your girls, I see parts of him, the parts the world didn't understand." Alexander nodded slowly. "You must miss him. Every day," she said. "But I find comfort in helping others like him. Maybe that's my way of keeping his light alive." For the first time, Alexander saw beyond the uniform and the quiet strength. He saw a woman who had known pain and turned it into compassion. That night, when he went to check on his daughters, he found Sophie asleep with a drawing on her bed. It was a picture of 4 stick figures, 3 small ones holding hands and 1 tall figure standing beside them. Underneath, in her shaky handwriting, she had written, "Us and Miss E." Alexander smiled. He took the drawing, placed it on his desk, and stared at it for a long time. The next morning, Evelyn found a bouquet of white lilies on the kitchen counter with a small note. "Thank you for bringing light back into our home." She didn't say anything, but her eyes shimmered when she read it. As days continued, the relationship between Alexander and Evelyn grew into something based on quiet respect. He began asking her opinions on the girls' routines, on their schooling, even on the layout of the playroom. She spoke honestly but gently, never forgetting her place, but also never doubting her worth. One Saturday morning, Evelyn took the girls outside to the park. Alexander decided to come along. The park was alive with families, dogs, and the sound of children playing. It was a world Alexander rarely stepped into. He felt slightly out of place in his pressed shirt and polished shoes, but Evelyn made it seem natural. Lila sat under a tree arranging pebbles in neat lines. Sophie ran to the swings laughing as Evelyn pushed her gently. Maya sat on Alexander's lap holding her bear. At first he didn't know what to do, but Evelyn whispered, "She likes it when you hum." He blinked. Yes, just softly. So he did. A simple tune, off-key but gentle. Maya leaned her head against his chest, calm and still. For the first time, she didn't pull away. Something in his chest broke open, not in pain but in relief. He wrapped an arm around her, careful not to startle her. Evelyn smiled from a distance, her eyes kind and knowing. That night, Alexander called his mother on the phone. She hadn't heard his voice in weeks. "Mom," he said softly, "the girls are doing better." "That's wonderful," she said. "What changed?" He thought for a moment. "Someone came into our lives. She understands them." His mother chuckled gently. "Sometimes angels don't come with wings, son." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I think you're right." The next few weeks felt lighter. Alexander spent more time at home, joining meals, reading bedtime stories, even helping with art projects. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying, and the girls felt it. Evelyn noticed too, but she never praised him outright. She simply smiled and said, "They're lucky to have you." One evening, as he walked past the living room, he saw Evelyn sitting with Maya on her lap, reading a picture book. Maya wasn't looking at the pictures, she was staring at Evelyn's face, completely at peace. Alexander stood there for a long time, realizing something he hadn't before. He had spent years building walls, around his work, around his heart, thinking that money and control could protect him from pain. But those walls had only trapped him in loneliness. Evelyn hadn't torn them down. She had shown him a door out of them. That night, he found himself remembering his wife's last words. She had whispered, "Don't forget to love them. Alex, they need you more than you think." He had failed that promise for years, but maybe now he could make it right. As he turned off the lights, he heard Evelyn humming again, the same tune she always sang when the house went quiet. It was the sound of calm, of love, of healing. For the first time in years, Alexander slept peacefully. The days in the Grant mansion had started to feel different now. Morning light no longer fell on silence but on movement and laughter. The house that had once felt like a shell now had a heartbeat. Every sound, soft footsteps, tiny giggles, even the clinking of dishes, felt alive. Evelyn had become part of that rhythm. She moved through the house like a quiet song, always calm, always gentle. The girls trusted her completely now. They looked for her when they were scared, smiled when she entered the room, and copied her small habits. The way she folded napkins, the way she hummed before bedtime, the way she spoke softly even when things went wrong. But the biggest change wasn't in them. It was in Alexander. He had stopped working late every night. He came home before sunset now, sometimes even helping with dinner or watching the girls' bedtime routines. His phone stayed silent during those hours. His assistants had learned not to schedule meetings past 6. He was still learning how to be present, but he was trying. Every evening felt like practice, a slow rebuilding of something he had lost long ago. One Friday night, Evelyn found him in the kitchen trying to make pancakes for the girls. Flour covered the counter, and there was a small cloud of white dust in the air. He looked up as she walked in, slightly embarrassed. "I thought I'd make breakfast for dinner," he said, wiping his hands. "They love pancakes, right?" Evelyn smiled. "They do, sir. But maybe we can save the kitchen from a snowstorm next time." He laughed, a sound that even surprised him. "Would you like some help?" she asked. He nodded, stepping aside as she took over. She didn't scold him for the mess. She just showed him how to mix the batter right, how to keep the heat low so they wouldn't burn. When the pancakes were ready, the girls sat around the table in their pajamas, eyes wide with excitement. Lila stacked hers neatly. Sophie drizzled syrup with full concentration, and Maya held her fork carefully like it was a treasure. Alexander watched them eat, smiling. "You know," he said, "I used to cook for them when they were little." Evelyn glanced up with interest. "You did?" He nodded. "Clara and I would make breakfast together every Sunday. Pancakes were her favorite. The girls would help stir the batter even though most of it ended up on the floor." Evelyn smiled softly. "She sounds like she was wonderful." "She was," Alexander said, his voice quieter now. "She made everything feel easy, even the hard days." There was silence for a moment. The sound of the girls' laughter filled the space between them. "She'd be proud of them," Evelyn said gently. He looked at her. "And probably disappointed in me." Evelyn shook her head. "No, sir. She'd be grateful you're still here trying." The words settled deep in him. After dinner, when the girls had gone to bed, Alexander lingered in the kitchen as Evelyn cleaned up. He felt comfortable around her now, something rare for him. "Do you ever rest?" he asked, watching her fold a towel. She smiled. "I do, but I find peace in the small things." "Cleaning, cooking, it's my way of thinking quietly." He nodded. "You seem to have endless patience." "I didn't always," she said, pausing. "I learned it. Life doesn't give you patience. It gives you moments where you either lose it or grow it." He smiled faintly. "You must have grown a lot." She laughed softly. "You could say that." The next morning, the house woke to a rare sound, music coming from the living room. Alexander was sitting at the piano, his fingers pressing slow, careful notes. The piano had been untouched since Clara's death. Lila stood by the doorway listening. Sophie and Maya joined her, curiosity in their faces. Evelyn watched from the kitchen, her heart warm. The song was simple, the same tune Evelyn often hummed. But when Alexander played it, it sounded fuller, like the house itself was breathing again. When he finished, he looked up and saw the girls standing there. For a moment, no one moved. Then Maya clapped her hands and giggled. Alexander laughed softly. "Did you like that?" Maya ran to him, holding her bear with one arm and reaching out the other. He picked her up carefully, feeling the small weight of her trust. From that day, music became a part of their evenings. Sometimes Evelyn played simple tunes on the keyboard, while the girls danced clumsily around her. Other times, Alexander joined in on the piano. Lila began to hum. Sophie sang words that didn't always make sense but sounded beautiful. Maya just twirled, her bear spinning with her. It became their little world, one where words didn't matter much. Only connection did, but outside that world. Not everyone understood the change. One afternoon, Alexander hosted a small business meeting at the mansion. A few colleagues and investors came over to discuss a new project. The girls were playing quietly in the other room while Evelyn supervised. During the meeting, one of the guests, a man Alexander had known for years, noticed Evelyn walking by. "She's new," he said, smirking slightly. "Quite the presence. Must be nice having help who actually stays." Alexander didn't respond. The man continued, lowering his voice. "Though I've got to say it's interesting seeing you so involved with the help these days." Alexander's jaw tightened. "She's part of my household staff, and she's excellent at her job," the man chuckled. Sure. "Just saying, you've changed, Alex, not that it's bad. Just surprising." Alexander forced a thin smile and ended the conversation quickly, but the word stuck with him like a splinter. Later that evening, as Evelyn was helping Maya with her bath, she noticed Alexander standing in the doorway, quiet and distant. "Is something wrong, sir?" she asked gently. He shook his head. "No, nothing." But his tone told another story. When the girls were asleep, she found him in his study staring out the window. The city lights reflected in his eyes, distant and cold. "You've been quiet," she said softly. He sighed. People talk too much, she tilted her head. What about? He hesitated. About you, about me, about how things look. Evelyn was silent for a moment. Then she said, people always talk when they don't understand something good. He looked at her, his expression heavy. You don't deserve to be talked about. She smiled faintly. I'm not worried about what they say, sir. I know who I am, and I know why I'm here. He nodded slowly. You've changed this place, Evelyn. You've changed me. Her eyes softened. Maybe you just found the parts of yourself you thought were gone. He smiled a little. Maybe. The conversation ended there, but it stayed with both of them. Over the next few days, Alexander found himself thinking differently about what others said. He realized that for the first time in years, he actually cared about something real, not just appearances or deals, but love, patience, and connection. He started taking the girls out more, small walks, trips to the park, even grocery shopping. People stared sometimes, but he didn't care. He was proud of them. One afternoon when they were at a cafe, Maya spilled her juice. The old Alexander would have sighed in frustration. But now he simply smiled, grabbed a napkin, and said, It's okay, kiddo. We'll clean it up together. Evelyn, sitting beside them, smiled. You're learning fast, he laughed. I have a good teacher. At home, their bond grew deeper. Sophie began talking more, asking Evelyn questions and telling her stories in her own way. Lila started drawing pictures of their family, always including Evelyn in them. Maya began saying short words softly, shyly, but she was trying. One evening, Alexander walked into the living room to find Maya sitting in Evelyn's lap, repeating a word again and again. Light, she said. Pointing at the lamp, Evelyn smiled, guiding her hand. Yes, light. Alexander froze. It was the first time he had heard Maya speak clearly. He stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. Did she just say that? Evelyn nodded, her eyes shining. She's been practicing for days. He felt tears gather in his eyes. Light, he repeated softly. Maya looked at him, giggled, and said it again. Light. In that moment, the word meant everything. That night, Alexander sat in his study alone. He looked around at the walls lined with awards, photos, and certificates of success. For years, those things had been his pride. But now they looked empty. He realized that all the things he had built meant nothing compared to that one small word from his daughter. He closed his laptop, turned off the lights, and went to check on the girls. They were asleep, peaceful and safe. Evelyn was folding laundry quietly near the window. You should rest, he said softly. She looked up and smiled. I will, just finishing this. He hesitated, then said, Thank you. For what? For giving them back their light, he said. She looked at him, her eyes warm. They always had it, sir. They just needed someone to see it. He didn't reply, but his heart felt full. In the following weeks, small miracles kept happening. Lila began helping Sophie organize her drawings. Maya started humming when she felt happy. Even the staff moved with more energy. It was as if Evelyn's calm spirit had touched everyone. One Sunday afternoon, Alexander hosted a small gathering, a quiet charity dinner for families of children with special needs. Evelyn helped prepare everything, making sure it felt welcoming, not formal. When guests arrived, many of them brought their children. The mansion, once a place of isolation, was now filled with joy and conversation. During the dinner, one of the mothers came up to Alexander and said, Your home feels so peaceful. How do you manage it? He smiled, glancing toward Evelyn, who was helping Maya and another child build blocks on the floor. Someone taught me to listen instead of manage, he said. That night, after everyone left, the house was quiet again, but it was the good kind of quiet. The kind that comes from contentment, not emptiness. Evelyn was putting away dishes when Alexander spoke from the doorway. I want to do something, he said. Something lasting. For children like mine. She looked at him curiously. What do you mean? I want to start a foundation, he said, to support families with autistic children, for therapy, education, whatever they need. Something real. Evelyn's eyes widened. That would change lives. He nodded. You've shown me what real change looks like. I want to pass it on. She smiled, emotion glistening in her eyes. Clara would be proud. He nodded, his voice low. I hope so. As they stood there, the sound of laughter drifted from upstairs. The girls were still awake, giggling about something. Evelyn smiled. I should go check on them. He watched her walk up the stairs, a soft light following her like she carried it wherever she went. For the first time in a long time, Alexander felt at peace. He knew the journey wasn't over, but now he had hope built not on money or control, but on love, patience, and understanding, and deep down, he knew one thing for certain. The woman who had come to clean his house had ended up cleaning his heart instead. The morning sun came through the tall windows of the mansion, warming the marble floors. It had been weeks since the charity dinner, and the house now carried a new kind of energy. It was quieter, but not empty. The silence felt full, like the pause between heartbeats. Evelyn walked through the hallway carrying a basket of folded clothes. She could hear the faint sound of giggling from the playroom. When she peeked in, she saw the 3 girls sitting on the floor surrounded by colorful blocks. Maya was trying to build a tower that kept falling, but she laughed each time it did. "Try again," Evelyn said softly, setting the basket aside. Maya smiled and began stacking the blocks once more, her small fingers moving carefully. Lila was drawing near the window, sunlight catching her brown hair. Sophie was humming a tune Evelyn had taught her the night before. The peace in the room made Evelyn stop for a moment. She thought about how much had changed. When she first came to this house, the walls felt like stone. Now they felt warm. Downstairs, Alexander sat in his study surrounded by papers and sketches. But these weren't business documents. They were plans for something new at his foundation. He wanted it to be more than a name on a building. He wanted it to mean something real. He had started visiting therapy centers, talking to families, learning about what they needed most. He realized that money could help, but compassion could change everything. Evelyn often helped him organize his notes. She wasn't just his maid anymore. She had become someone he trusted deeply. Her advice, always simple and thoughtful, guided him more than the consultants ever did. One afternoon, he asked her to sit down while he showed her the latest version of the plan. "I want to call it the Light Foundation," he said, "because of Maya." Evelyn smiled. "That's beautiful." He nodded slowly. "She taught me that even a single word can mean hope." For a moment, their eyes met, and though neither said it aloud, both felt the weight of everything that had changed between them. Later that week, Alexander held a small press conference to announce his new project. The reporters expected the same polished businessman they always saw, confident, distant, precise. But when he stood at the podium, he spoke differently. "I used to think success meant numbers, buildings, and recognition," he said. "But I've learned that real success is measured in the lives you touch. This foundation is for families like mine, for children who see the world in their own beautiful way. It's for the light that never goes out even when life feels dark." The crowd went silent. Cameras clicked, but no one interrupted. They could all feel something genuine in his words. Evelyn watched from the back of the room, her eyes full of quiet pride. After the event, as people came up to congratulate him, Alexander slipped away for a moment and found her standing near the exit. "You were right," he said softly. "People listened." She smiled. "They heard your heart, not just your voice." He looked at her with gratitude. "You've been part of every step." "I only reminded you of what you already had," she said. That night, the mansion felt calm again. The girls were asleep early, tired from the excitement of the day. Evelyn sat in the kitchen sipping tea when Alexander joined her. He had loosened his tie and his expression was softer than usual. "Do you ever think about how strange life is?" he asked. She looked up. "All the time." "I used to plan everything," he said. "Every detail, every meeting, every outcome. But the best things that happened to me, I never planned them." "Not one," she smiled, stirring her tea. "Life doesn't always follow plans. Sometimes it gives us what we need, not what we expect." He nodded slowly. "You've taught me that." They talked for a while, not about work or responsibilities, but about small things. Childhood memories, favorite songs, the smell of rain. It was simple conversation, but it felt deep. When Evelyn finally stood to leave, Alexander said, "Thank you." "For staying," she paused. "Where else would I be needed more?" After she went to her room, Alexander sat alone for a while. He thought about how much this woman had changed, not just his house, but his entire way of seeing the world. He knew now that wealth could never buy peace, but kindness could build it. Over the next few months, the Light Foundation started its work. The first center opened in the city, offering therapy and workshops for children with autism and their families. Alexander visited often, bringing the girls along. Evelyn was always by his side, helping organize activities, greeting families, making sure every child felt seen. The families loved her. They said she had a gift, the way she knelt to speak to children, not down to them. The way her eyes never judged, only understood. One day, a mother approached Alexander in tears. "Thank you for doing this," she said. "You don't know how much it means." He smiled softly. "I think I do." At that moment, he looked across the room and saw Evelyn sitting with Maya, helping her draw. They were laughing quietly. The sight made something ache gently in his chest. Not pain, but gratitude. Back at the mansion, life had settled into a rhythm again, but a happier one. Every morning, the girls waited for Evelyn at the breakfast table. They had started helping with chores too, folding napkins, setting the table, even trying to sweep. Evelyn made it a game, and laughter always filled the air. Alexander joined them more often now. He liked seeing the small moments. Sophie tying her shoe for the first time, Maya learning to count, Lila reading stories aloud. One evening, Lila came to him with a drawing. "It's our family," she said proudly. He looked at it. 4 figures standing under a big yellow sun. Himself, the 3 girls, and Evelyn. He smiled, his throat tight. "It's perfect," he said. She nodded. "Because everyone's happy now." Later, he placed the drawing in a frame on his desk. It was worth more to him than any award he'd ever received. But even as peace filled their days, Evelyn carried a quiet worry in her heart. She had never planned to stay this long. Her contract was for a year, and that time was almost over. She didn't know how to tell him. One night, after the girls had gone to bed, she walked into his study holding an envelope. "Sir," she began softly, "there's something I need to talk about." He looked up from his papers, sensing the tone in her voice. "What is it?" She placed the envelope on his desk. "My contract ends next month," he froze. The words hung heavy between them. "I haven't decided what comes next," she continued gently. "But I wanted to tell you before you heard it from the agency." He stared at the envelope for a moment, then looked up. "You're thinking of leaving?" Evelyn hesitated. "I don't know yet." He leaned back, his voice low. "You've become part of this family. I can't imagine the house without you." She smiled sadly. "You've all come so far. Maybe it's time you keep growing on your own." He stood, walking closer. "It's not just about the house, Evelyn. You've changed us. You've changed me." She looked at him, emotion in her eyes. "That means a lot." "But maybe that's the point of people like me, to come into lives, help mend them, and move on." He didn't know what to say. The thought of her leaving made the walls of the mansion feel colder already. For days, he couldn't stop thinking about it. He tried to act normal around the girls, but his mind kept drifting. Evelyn noticed too. One evening, she found him sitting in the garden, lost in thought. "You've been quiet again," she said, sitting beside him. He smiled faintly. "I've been thinking about what you said. About leaving." She looked down. "I haven't decided yet." "I know," he said softly. "But if you do, I want you to know something." She turned to him. "You didn't just help my daughters," he said. "You helped me become their father again. And you helped me become a better man." Her eyes filled with emotion. "That's the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me." He smiled gently. "It's the truth." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the soft hum of crickets and the rustling leaves. Finally, Evelyn said, "No matter where I go, this house will always be part of me. So will all of you." He nodded slowly. "And you'll always be part of us." Inside the house, the light from the windows spilled across the garden. It looked warm, alive, nothing like the dark, lonely mansion it once was. As the days passed, the girls began to sense something. They clung to Evelyn a little more, asked more questions, wanted her nearby all the time. Evelyn couldn't bring herself to tell them yet. She didn't want to see the confusion in their eyes. One evening, while tucking them into bed, Lila looked up and asked, "You'll be here forever, right?" Evelyn's heart sank. "I'll always be here in your heart," she said softly. Maya hugged her tightly, her tiny arms around Evelyn's neck. Sophie whispered, "Don't go." Evelyn smiled, tears in her eyes. "Sleep now, little ones. We'll talk tomorrow." When she stepped out of their room, she found Alexander standing in the hallway. He had heard everything. Their eyes met, both filled with emotions they couldn't name. Neither of them spoke. But in that silence, something unspoken passed between them, something tender, real and fragile. That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. He went to his study and sat in the dark, the only light coming from the lamp on his desk. On it lay the framed drawing, the one Lila had made. He picked it up and stared at it for a long time. He thought about everything that picture meant. Then he made a decision. The next morning, when Evelyn came down to start breakfast, she found an envelope on the kitchen counter with her name on it. Inside was a letter. It said, "Evelyn, you once said people like you come into lives to mend them and move on. Maybe that's true, but I don't think your work here is done yet. You've become more than a caretaker. You're family. This house isn't home without you. I can't change your decision, but if you choose to stay, it will never just be as staff. You'll always have a place here as part of our lives. With gratitude." Alexander. Evelyn stood there reading the letter again and again, tears filling her eyes. She sat down quietly, thinking about everything she had been through in her life. Every house she had worked in, every child she had cared for, every goodbye she had said. But this felt different. This wasn't just a job. It was love, not romantic, but human, real. Outside, the morning sun began to rise, painting the walls with gold. The house, once a place of emptiness, now held warmth, laughter, and light. Evelyn looked toward the stairs where faint laughter echoed. She folded the letter and smiled. She wasn't sure what she would decide yet, but she knew one thing. Her life had changed forever, and so had theirs, and somewhere deep in her heart she felt that maybe, just maybe, she was already home. The next few days after the letter were quiet, but it was a peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that happens when words have already said everything they need to. Evelyn went about her usual work, helping with breakfast, brushing the girls' hair, setting out clothes, tidying rooms. But there was something lighter in her steps. She had not yet given Alexander her answer in words, but she knew in her heart what it would be. She just wanted to take her time to feel sure, to let the decision settle naturally, not because she felt pressured, but because she finally understood she had a real choice. That morning she found Alexander in the garden, sitting under the same tree where she had once watched him play with his daughters. The sunlight touched the side of his face and the wind gently moved the leaves around them. "You're up early," she said, walking over with a tray of tea. He smiled softly. "Couldn't sleep much. The girls have been asking if you've made your decision." She laughed quietly. "They're not the only ones, I suppose." He looked at her for a long moment. "I didn't mean to pressure you. I just wanted you to know what you mean to us." She nodded, setting the tray down on the table between them. "I know. And I want you to know that I'm grateful, more than words can say. You've all given me something I didn't even know I was missing." He tilted his head slightly. "And what's that?" She looked out toward the garden where the girls were chasing butterflies. "A family, a place to belong." He didn't say anything for a moment, just smiled quietly. Then, with gentle curiosity, he asked, "So does that mean you'll stay?" Evelyn took a deep breath, letting the question hang in the air for a moment before answering. "Yes, I'll stay. Not as an employee, but as part of this family, if that's truly what you want." His smile grew, and something deep in his chest relaxed, as if a heavy weight had finally lifted. "That's exactly what I want." He stood and extended his hand, not as an employer, but as a friend, as someone deeply grateful. She shook it with a smile. That day felt like a new beginning for all of them. Later that afternoon, the house was full of the smell of baking. The girls had convinced Evelyn to make their favorite cookies, chocolate chip with a hint of orange zest. Flour dusted the counters, the floor, even the tips of their noses. Alexander walked in just as Sophie was licking batter off a spoon. He raised an eyebrow, pretending to look stern. "Is that part of the recipe?" Sophie giggled. "It is now." He laughed and rolled up his sleeves to help, earning loud cheers from the girls. For the first time, he didn't care about the mess or the chaos. The sound of their laughter was worth more than any spotless kitchen. Evelyn watched him and thought of the man he used to be, so distant, always behind walls of duty and silence. Now he was right there in the middle of the noise, laughing with his daughters, getting flour on his shirt, looking happier than she'd ever seen him. When the cookies were ready, They all gathered around the big table to eat them warm from the oven. The sweetness filled the room, and the moment felt perfect in its simplicity. Afterward, Alexander took a quiet walk outside. The night air was cool, the stars bright. He stopped under the tree again and looked up at the house, his home, now filled with light, warmth, and laughter. He thought about how far they had come, how different everything was, and how one person, a kind woman with patience and compassion, had changed everything without ever asking for anything in return. He went back inside to find Evelyn cleaning up the kitchen. "You don't have to do all that tonight," he said gently. She smiled. "It's all right. I like to finish what I start." He leaned against the doorway. "You've finished more than chores here, Evelyn. You've healed something I thought was broken forever." She looked down, humbled. "Sometimes things just need a little love, that's all." He nodded slowly. "Then you've given us more than I could ever repay." "Love isn't something you repay," she said softly. "It's something you share." He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "Then I'll do my best to keep sharing it." As the months passed, the changes in their lives grew deeper. The Light Foundation continued to expand. Families from all over came to visit, and Alexander made sure each one felt seen and supported. Evelyn often worked at his side, not because she had to, but because she wanted to help. She had a special gift with people. Parents opened up to her easily, and children trusted her without hesitation. There was something about her calm voice, her gentle way of listening, that made people feel safe. The girls thrived too. Therapy and love were helping them flourish in ways no one had thought possible. Sophie began to speak more confidently. Lila found joy in painting, and Maya started responding to music with pure delight. Every small step was a miracle in its own way. One evening, the foundation hosted a small family event, a picnic on the lawn behind the center. Music played softly, children ran across the grass, and parents shared stories. Alexander stood by the stage talking with some guests, but his eyes often drifted to where Evelyn was sitting with a group of mothers. She was laughing gently, helping one of the children tie their shoelaces. The sunset light touched her hair, and she looked peaceful, like she was exactly where she was meant to be. When the event ended and everyone began to leave, Evelyn stayed behind to help clean up. Alexander joined her. "You know," he said quietly, picking up a stack of plates, "I used to believe that success meant building things, companies, projects, empires. But now I see it's about building people, hearts, trust, love." She nodded, smiling softly. "Those are the things that last." He looked at her. "You've built that here, Evelyn." Her eyes met his. "We all have." That night, when they returned home, the girls were still wide awake from all the excitement. They begged for one more story before bed, so Evelyn sat between them and began telling a tale about a man who had everything but couldn't see it, until someone showed him where to look. When she finished, Lila whispered sleepily, "That sounds like Daddy." Evelyn smiled. "Maybe it is." Maya, who rarely spoke, whispered something so soft it almost went unheard. "And you're the angel." Evelyn froze, her heart swelling with emotion. She stroked Maya's hair gently and whispered, "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who loves you very much." Alexander stood by the doorway listening. He didn't move or speak. He just watched the woman who had brought light back into his children's lives, and into his own. After the girls were asleep, he found her in the hallway. "She called you an angel," he said quietly. Evelyn smiled. "Children see things with pure hearts," he nodded. "Maybe they see more truth than we do." She looked at him then, her eyes filled with a warmth that words couldn't capture. "We all have angels around us, Mr. Bennett. Some just look like ordinary people." He smiled faintly. "Then I hope you never stop being ours." The year rolled on, bringing small celebrations, busy days, and quiet nights. The mansion no longer felt like a cold palace. It was now a home full of laughter, warmth, and stories. Christmas came with twinkling lights and soft music. Snow fell outside, painting everything white and still. Inside, the girls decorated cookies while Evelyn and Alexander watched, exchanging small smiles. After dinner, they all gathered by the fire. The girls opened small gifts, their faces glowing with happiness. Alexander handed Evelyn a small box. "For you," he said. She looked surprised. "You didn't have to. I wanted to," he said softly. Inside was a silver locket. She opened it to find a tiny photo. one of her with the 3 girls taken in the garden months ago. Her eyes filled with tears. "It's beautiful," he smiled. "So is what you've given us." She held the locket close to her heart. "Thank you." For a long moment, they just sat there by the fire, saying nothing. The crackle of the flames filled the silence, warm and comforting. In that moment, Evelyn realized something important. She hadn't just changed this family's life. They had changed hers too. They had reminded her of her own worth, her own light, her own ability to love and be loved in return. When the girls finally fell asleep, Alexander stood and looked around the room. The stockings, the laughter, the scent of cinnamon, it all felt alive again. He turned to Evelyn and said quietly, "Do you ever think about what brought you here? How everything could have been different if you hadn't answered that ad?" She nodded slowly. "I think about it often. Maybe it wasn't just chance. Maybe we were all meant to find each other." He smiled softly. "Maybe so." Time passed gently after that night. The seasons changed, the children grew, the foundation flourished. The story of their home became one of quiet miracles. Not the kind written in headlines, but the kind felt in everyday love and kindness. Years later, when the girls were older, they would still talk about Evelyn, the woman who came into their lives when they needed her most. But for Alexander, she was more than that. She was the reason his heart had opened again, the reason his home had meaning, and for Evelyn, this family became her greatest chapter, proof that love, no matter where it begins, can heal anything. Sometimes, she would sit by the same tree in the garden, watching the sunset, listening to the faint laughter drifting from the house. She would smile to herself and whisper, "This is what home feels like." It wasn't built from wealth or luxury. It was built from kindness, patience, and the courage to care. The mansion that had once felt cold and empty now breathed with warmth and life, and every corner of it carried the memory of one simple truth. When hearts open to love, miracles happen quietly, but they last forever.